أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Once again everybody, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm continuing my introduction of the parallels between the story of Yusuf alayhi salam and of Musa alayhi salam. And in the middle of this series, I'll say something that I will say at the end, but some concepts need to be iterated more than once so that they become sort of etched in your mind. And that's something to do with the word qasas. Qasas in Arabic doesn't actually mean stories. The word for that in Arabic is qisas. The plural of qissa is qisas. The word qasas is a masdar, it's an infinitive noun. What that means is an account or telling an account. And it's important because Allah describes the stories that He tells of the Quran, He calls them qasas. And what that means, literally the verb qassa means to follow step by step. And it's the imagery of, footsteps in the sand and somebody's following, tracing somebody else's footsteps. So when a person is telling you a qissa, and they're telling the account, they're walking you through steps that somebody already took, right? And they're walking you through that journey step by step by step. So it's tatabbu', it's following closely is literally the meaning of the word qissa. Now Allah uses that word both for the narrative account of Yusuf alayhi salam and for Musa alayhi salam. It's interesting that both of those stories are following each other step by step by step. In a larger sense, what it also means is that all of the stories in the Quran follow one another step by step, creating one journey. Meaning, whether it's the story of Adam alayhi salam or Ibrahim alayhi salam, or it's the people of the cave, or it's the story of Zakaria alayhi salam, etc. They're all part of one large way of looking at the world, and they're not disconnected from each other. They're building on the same lessons and the same wisdom, and they're creating a holistic worldview. And so in storytelling, sometimes you've got one story that has pretty much nothing to do, has no reinforcement from another story. They're different worlds, they have different lessons, different teachings. But these accounts that Allah is telling us, they follow each other step by step, not just in history, but also in the wisdom that they have to teach and the guidance that they have to give. You'll find that they're all as-sirat al-mustaqim, they're all following the straight path. So the imagery of steps and path and journey are important in the language of the Quran, in the journey of guidance. That's why you find in the path of Allah or the straight path, here you find steps, نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. But anyway, so coming back to where we were in our discussion, we left off on 14 parallels between the trial phase of the career of Yusuf alayhi salam and the trial phase of the career of Musa alayhi salam. Just to remind everybody, Yusuf alayhi salam was tried by the minister's wife. That was his fitna, that was his trial. And Musa alayhi salam was tried when he tried to rescue a fellow Israelite from the clutches of an Egyptian soldier and threw a punch. Right? So those are the two trial episodes in these two stories. So we're at a point now in the story where Yusuf alayhi salam has run to the door, and Alfa ya sayyidaha ladal bab, they found the owner of the house, meaning the husband, at the door. And she immediately points out, مَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ أَرَادَ بِأَهْلِكَ سُوءًا إِلَّا أَنْ يُسْجَنَ أَوْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. What should be the compensation of someone who wanted evil, who intended evil for your family, huh? Look at this servant of ours who's going to do evil with me. He should be imprisoned or at least tortured with painful torture. So she falsely testifies, and her intention is to take guilt off of herself. Well, if she can't throw herself under the bus, might as well throw him under the bus, right? Somebody's got to look guilty, so that's what she tries to do. So her intention is evil in doing so, and her intention is to take attention away from herself, because she's the actual culprit. By contrast, in the story of Musa alayhi salam, you find the second time around when he ran into this criminal who was in trouble with another cop, and he decides not to help him this time. He's just going to not get involved, So he says, that you are definitely from the kind of people that commit this kind of crime all the time. And so he's not going to get involved, and eventually he notices that he's about to get killed. فَلَمَّا أَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يَبْطِشَ بِالَّذِي هُوَ عَدُوٌّ لَهُمَا. And finally, when he decided to get off his, get off his back and decide to go in and help the soldier because he was going to get killed. The criminal was going to get killed, and he figured, okay, I won't help him punch another soldier, but I don't want him getting killed either. So he tried to get towards him to try to help him. He cries out and he says, أتريد أن تقتلني كما قتلت نفسا بالأمس يا موسى أتريد أن تقتلني كما قتلت نفسا بالأمس. Musa, are you trying to kill me like you killed somebody yesterday? Now part of that testimony is true. He did kill someone yesterday. But the intention for that testimony is actually again evil. He's taking blame off of himself. The cops' attention will be diverted from arresting him for a crime. He just found a murder criminal. Right? So it's diverting attention. So both of them have evil intent of diverting attention from themselves. They're not interested in testimony for the purposes of justice. And from it, you actually learn something in Allah's way of teaching us about the larger principles of justice. In a court of law, it doesn't matter how good a judge is. It doesn't matter how good the lawyers are, etc. The correct testimony can be used for the wrong reasons. Correct testimony against person A can be used to hide the actual, doings of person B, right? Because all the focus came on this and distracted from what somebody else did, So yes, there's false testimony and that's criminal, but correct testimony can also be used for criminal activity. It can be used to deflect attention from another crime that's taking place. Now we come to another advantage. She is taking advantage of the fact that she's a master. I actually alluded to this before. She's taking advantage of her influence over him because she's his boss. And on the flip side, the culprit is trying to take advantage in the story of Musa alayhi salam because he's a slave. He's a poor slave who's getting beat up. So he's using pity to call on Musa alayhi salam and take advantage of him. So again, I remind you that sometimes people will try to take advantage of you and try to get you to do the wrong thing or get involved in something you shouldn't be getting involved in because they have an influence over you, like she has an influence over Yusuf. And sometimes people get you involved in something because you feel bad for them, but your pity for them doesn't mean that it's a good idea to get involved. Maybe they're up to no good. Or maybe this thing is not something you should be touching or getting involved in. So they're getting to your better senses and your mercy, they're appealing to your mercy, and you're entangling yourself in something that you shouldn't be entangled in. Then Yusuf alayhi salam's case and Musa alayhi salam's case, interesting when it does come, the things come to light, you see two different kinds of evidence. What exonerates Yusuf alayhi salam is that the shirt is looked at. If she really thinks that he was trying to take advantage of her and his shirt is ripped, then in order to defend herself, she must have torn his shirt. But his shirt would be ripped from the front, but in fact it was ripped from behind, which means he's running away from her and she's grabbing him from behind. So he's not the criminal, she is. She's the culprit. So it was material evidence that was used to establish Yusuf's innocence. On the flip side, there is no material evidence. All you have is witness testimony. It's true testimony of the criminal, but that's all you have. And those are the only two kinds of things you can bring into a court of law. Either you can bring in evidence or you can bring in material testimony. That's pretty much the only two things you can bring to make a case. And you see both of those things being brought in these two cases. And this is again an important feature of contrast between the two stories. It was proven that Yusuf is innocent. Obviously, the shirt ripped from behind. وَإِنْ كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِنْ دُبُرٍ فَكَذَبَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. If a shirt is ripped from behind, then she's the one who's told a lie, and he's telling the truth. He's from those that speak truthfully. And that was proven. But it was proven inside the house, right outside the bedroom door. It wasn't outside in a public court. It was just in the hallway of the house with a couple of servants or family nearby. That's it. Nobody else knows. And the husband knows. So Yusuf is innocent, and his innocence has been proven, but not known publicly. People don't know. But Musa alayhi salam, when the man was coming, when he was coming to rescue the man, but the man actually thought that that Musa alayhi salam is gonna kill him, and he called him out in public. You want to kill me like you killed someone yesterday? He incriminated him, but he didn't incriminate him privately. He incriminated him publicly. Now this is important because as a matter of fact, these kinds of cases, if you incriminate somebody publicly, for example, there's a danger of a mob mentality, right? People decide to become judge, jury, and executioner all in one because you called somebody out publicly. And when you incriminate people or put people on the spot publicly over and over again, it might be that it starts with rhetoric and riots or people that are just protesting and things like that, and somebody goes a little too far and burns somebody's house down or burns a car or takes some action, or things escalate. When you create an incriminating narrative against a group of people or even an individual, it's not just justice that's being served, a mob mentality is created. So that's one extreme of injustice. When you decide that you're going to talk about guilt and innocence just openly on the street. This is something that should be discussed in a court of law with all of the evidences and people that will actually deliver justice. That's when this should be discussed, not in a public circus. On the flip side, Yusuf alayhi salam's innocence has been declared, but the evidence is hidden away, right? And the fact is, pretty soon he's going to end up in jail. We already know what happens. Hindsight is 20/20. He's going to end up in jail. And the reason he ended up in jail is because the evidence was never made public. Had this been publicly known, he could never have ended up in jail. You understand? It's only because it was kept hush-hush that it was kept, this was done. So what's the balance in between these two? And both of these extremes led to injustice. Both of these lead to injustice. So what's the balance in between? Evidence cannot be hidden, but it must be declared to the proper authorities. It has to be declared to the proper authorities. And that's the balance in between these two sides that created an unjust scenario. In fact, because a police officer was killed, right? A soldier or a police officer, because it was a military state, right? The police, in the case of Musa alayhi salam, secretly decided that they're going to kill him. They're thirsty for blood. They're not interested in arresting him and bringing him to trial. They want to execute him. They want to kill him, right? So there's elements of injustice on both sides. One, because it wasn't brought to the proper authorities, and the second, because the authorities themselves were corrupt. They're the ones that are looking to kill you. The job of a police officer is not to kill you. The job of a police officer is to arrest you and bring you to justice. They're not the justice. They're the enforcement. They're the public safety, but they're not the ones whose job is to kill you. So that's the kind of the contrast you see between the two. Yusuf alayhi salam is, as he says, "Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwaya." When he told the minister's wife that I won't be doing this because I'm loyal to the one who gave me housing, who provided for me, who took care of me. The Rabb is referring to Allah, but Mufassirun also say, like I mentioned yesterday, it can refer to the master of the house also. So I'm not going to do that. I'm loyal to him. He's been good to me. I'm going to be good to him. On the flip side, Musa alayhi salam, his animosity towards the Egyptian soldier and what he did, part of it was he's seen that injustice every day. So he's got an animosity for Egyptian rule, and he knows that his adopting mother always makes dua, "Najini min al-qawmi al-zalimin," rescue me from the wrongdoing people. So even though he's royalty, he doesn't see that as a privilege. He doesn't see that as a perk that he gets to enjoy. I had some kids watch The Prince of Egypt just so they get some perspective, because the Disney version of Moses, of Musa alayhi salam, is so far from the Quran. Like they're showing him running chariots and having a good old time and partying and knows nothing of a God, and he's, even at some point womanizing, and ma'adallah, they have these attributions to the prophets, and eventually he finds Allah, he finds God, after the accident happens, But the Quran paints a completely different picture. He's being raised by a believing woman. He has a believing character from the beginning, and actually what's the description of his early years? فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ وَاسْتَوَىٰ آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا. Wisdom, knowledge, ihsan, maturity, strength. These are the qualities of Musa alayhi salam, not what you see in the Disney version. And a lot of times people think they're going to watch those movies and they'll learn something about the prophets. No, you won't. You learn about somebody with the same name and a Disney story, and with some elements taken from the actual story. But the Quran, one of its roles is to tell the account as it actually happened, and to exonerate the prophets from some of the claims that are made about them. They are pure from those claims. So anyway, one is partly loyal to the Egyptian ruler, and the other is partly has animosity towards the Egyptian ruler that led him to do that. Now, Yusuf alayhi salam is told to keep a secret. Yusuf, a'rid an hadha, wastaghfiri li dhanbiki. When this whole thing came out and it was proven that he's innocent, word's going to get out, right? And word got out, leaked anyway, but Yusuf is told, you be quiet. Rumors can spread, But rumors will become facts if you open your mouth, right? Because it happened to you. And until you open your mouth, all there will be rumors. And rumors will be all different kinds. All kinds of rumors will spread. So you need to keep quiet. And he had to tell Yusuf alayhi salam to keep quiet because he's a politician. He can't afford a scandal because it hurts his political aspirations, right? He's a public figure. So he's telling Yusuf alayhi salam to keep things hush-hush. On the other side, Musa alayhi salam, the killing happened in the middle of the day, but nobody was around, and he decides to keep it a secret himself. He doesn't go out and publicly say, I've done this wrong, etc., and it was outed later on. So the commonality being the element of secrecy. And of course, Yusuf alayhi salam, the testimony of someone, shahidum min ahliha, a witness from her family itself, from her household, said, if the shirt is ripped from behind, then she's the one who did it. And that's how he was vindicated. For the kids that are watching, vindicated means proved innocent. So he was proven innocent. And then on the other side, Musa alayhi salam, somebody testifies and he's proven guilty. So now we've got two prophets. One is proven innocent and the other one is proven guilty. You got the contrast between the two. And part of that guilt and innocence, what part of the testimony against either one is important to understand. The minister's wife tried to say that Yusuf alayhi salam is not a good character. He intends evil for the household. And the guy who testified against Musa alayhi salam, he said, "In turidu illa an takuna jabbaran fil ardi, wa ma turidu an takuna min al muslihin." You just want to be a bully beating up people. That's what you want to do. You don't want to make peace. So he's character assassinating Musa alayhi salam. Testimony should be about what happened. Testimony should not be about what kind of person this is. You don't get to say, you're a bully, this is what you want, this is what your intentions are. You can't testify about someone else's intentions. Because you are not in control or have no knowledge of anyone else's intentions. The only thing you can know are someone else's what? Actions. But you'll notice the word arada and turidu are used in both cases. She says about Yusuf, he intends to do harm to your family. He's talking about his what? Intentions. On the flip side, this guy, the con artist, is telling Musa, you just intend to go around forcing and beating up people and bullying people. This is what you intend to do. And you don't intend to do any good. You don't intend to make any reform. وَمَا تُرِيدُ أَن تَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُصْلِحِينَ. So when testimony starts painting the picture of somebody's intent, that's when you lead into conjecture and you don't really know these aren't facts anymore. You're using your imagination to figure out what was going on in somebody's heart. Right? Testimony in justice should only be about what actions we can see. The intentions behind those actions cannot be evidenced by somebody's testimony. I know what was inside of their heart. But they both try to do that to pin their victims by way of their words. Then of course, there are two troublesome encounters. This is even the step-by-step construction of the story in both cases. Yusuf had an encounter with the minister's wife inside her quarters. Then later on, he had a second encounter with her, with the different ladies and the food that was prepared. Right? So there's two encounters. In Musa alayhi salam's story, he first encountered this con artist getting beat up in isolation. The next day he encounters him again in public. Right? In a larger setting. So both stories have two encounters with these people. The second encounter in Yusuf's story was in front of a larger group. It was a bunch of ladies. So it wasn't just her and him now. It was a bunch of women. And the second encounter in the story of Musa is in public. It's in front of a larger group also. So even that element is carried forward. Then the minister does not help Yusuf escape the authorities. Meaning after the second encounter, Yusuf is going to get thrown in jail. But the minister knows better. The minister knows that he's innocent. And the minister has been good to him all this time. He's a friend, essentially. He's a boss, but he's also friendly to him. And he honors him, but he doesn't do anything to get him out of jail. And the Quran doesn't say why, but it hints to it. Basically, getting him out of jail would make people curious and would want to interview him. Hey, would you care to tell us what happened? And he knows that Yusuf alayhi salam is an honest person. So even if he doesn't intend to hurt his political career, just him giving honest testimony about what happened or exonerating himself will tank his political career. It's a smarter move to take this servant of mine who's not a VIP, who doesn't have immigration status, he's just a slave, to detain him indefinitely without trial, it's okay, because him getting out might hurt my political career, right? So he could help him, but he doesn't. On the flip side, you've got the police friend of Musa alayhi salam, who was in a secret meeting where they decided that they're going to kill Musa. If these policemen find out, these chiefs find out, that one of the people in their secret meeting is Musa's best friend and has accepted his religion and is actually going to go warn him against them, then they won't just kill Musa. Who will they kill? Him too. He's a traitor. You don't go back on your squad. But he's going to risk his life to go tell Musa, إِنَّ الْمَلَأَ يَأْتَمِرُونَ بِكَ لِيَقْتُلُوكَ. The chiefs have made a secret scheme to kill you. فَخْرُجْ, get out of here. إِنِّي لَكَ مِنَ النَّاصِحِينَ. I mean well for you. So you see, by contrast, one person who was in a position to help decided to help himself in his political career and let Yusuf alayhi salam rot in jail. And the other put his life on the line and actually came to Musa and helped him escape trouble. Now, it's also interesting that I've alluded to this, that elite women were in on the plot when it came to Yusuf alayhi salam. These were wealthy women that were talking, because the politicians and the wealthy have their own circles, right? They have their own galas and their own fancy dinners, and they have their own kind of social society and the social circle. So they're in on this scheme that she's going to get him thrown in jail, because she said that in front of all of them. She said, if he doesn't do what I want, then he's going to get thrown in jail. She said it straight up in front of them. So they're in on that entire scheme, and they know what really happened, and they're all going to be quiet about it, because they're all embarrassed too now, because their hands are all cut, which we'll get to when we get in the story. On the flip side, you've got elite men, police chiefs, the generals. They're in on a scheme to kill Musa alayhi salam. So even that parallels between the two. Their toxic admiration is the problem, meaning the women admired Yusuf alayhi salam, and that's what incriminated them, and that became a problem. And for Musa alayhi salam, their toxic hatred. Let me remind you, why did they hate Musa? I told you Allah put a special love of Musa in the heart of the Pharaoh. That you already know. But Musa alayhi salam was an Israelite, so he was from the slave race. His skin color was the skin color of the slaves. But he's being treated like royalty. So when he walks into the palace, the Egyptian guards have to hold the door open and say, "Good morning, Your Highness." Right? But in their heart, they're like, why are we calling this slave Your Highness? How did he get this position? Why do we have to pull the chair out so he can sit down? Why do we have to clean his room? Why do we have to cook him food? Because he's getting treated like royalty, while everyone else that looks like him is a what? Is a slave. So they have this deep hatred inside him that it's only the Pharaoh's love for him. We don't even get why. Because everyone other than him that's like him should actually be dead. And in fact, he should have been killed from the first time. And now that he's getting special treatment, everybody around the Pharaoh is like, you should have been killed. It burns them that a slave is getting that kind of treatment. In modern context, we don't think that we have slavery around the world, but you have people that are different skin color than ourselves, different tone than ourselves. In any country, it's not just an American problem, but in any country in the world, when you have a foreigner who's living well, and you're used to seeing foreigners be bus drivers, or foreigners be like selling bananas on the street corner, or you're used to foreigners being like the illegal workers, construction workers, or janitors and bathroom cleaners. And then you've got one of those foreigners buying $1 million home, a couple of $1 million home in the wealthiest neighborhood where all the old money lives. Right? And he's got a nicer car than everybody else. He's going to get some looks, isn't he? Like, what's he doing here? You don't belong here. And that's exactly that mentality. They had a toxic hatred for him because he's from the Israelites, the slave race, or the enslaved race, and yet he's being treated like royalty. That's why they were hoping for a chance to get rid of him. So toxic love and toxic hate on the other side. The women's scheme is foreshadowed by the minister. What I mean by that is, when she got caught outside the bedroom and the minister came forward and said, the shirt is ripped from behind, clearly you're messed up. You know what he said? He said, هَذَا مِنْ كَيْدِكُنَّ إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. Listen to the words. He said, this is the kind of scheming you women do. Your scheming is pretty amazing. Your scheming is amazing. And he didn't say one woman, he said women, plural. Which has its place in the story, but it's also foreshadowing that a bunch of women are going to be scheming. Right? He doesn't even know that's going to happen, but his words became true further down the road. On the other hand, there's no foreshadowing, but Musa alayhi salam knows, his friend knows of a scheme that's being hashed. and he comes and informs Musa alayhi salam. This is pretty ironic. Yusuf alayhi salam was found innocent but still jailed. Musa alayhi salam was found guilty but still escaped. Right? And it's remarkable that Musa alayhi salam escaped from one of the mightiest empires on earth with the biggest police state, and he escaped. And in both cases it happened after the second encounter. But you've got this irony how things play out in the world. Things don't play out as we expect. And the way Allah designs the story of our lives is not based on our expectations of justice and injustice. You know, the one proven innocent should be set free, and the one proven guilty should be jailed, etc., etc. No, it doesn't play out that way sometimes. And Allah has a larger scheme. And what people do to each other, they think they're doing it, but Allah is even a bigger architect over their designs. You know, Wallahu ghalibun ala amrihi. Allah has been dominant over his situation the entire time. That's what Allah claims about Yusuf alayhi salam. Now we come to the years of isolation. What do I mean by years of isolation? Okay, the trial is done. In the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, he's going to get thrown in jail. So he's going to be isolated. I was going to write here social distancing, but I decided not to. Because they were technically socially distanced. But anyway, years of isolation. So Yusuf alayhi salam is going to be in jail, isolated from his normal life and from society. Musa alayhi salam is going to be out in the desert, isolated from the Egyptian people and the society he's known and grown up with, not to mention his own family. So they're both isolated and separated. Now these years of isolation is what we're going to compare. Okay, so we compared their siblings, we compared their parents, we compared the trials they went through. Now we're comparing the isolation that they went through. Okay. So one is socially isolated in prison, the other socially isolated in the desert. He meets two men in prison. Yusuf meets two men in prison. Yusuf meets two women in the desert. So you've got 2 and 2. And on one side men and the other side women. It's pretty awesome. It's also pretty cool that the parental figure in Yusuf's story was a male, and he meets 2 men. And the parental figure in Musa's story is a female, and he meets 2 women. Right? So the male theme is carrying forward, and the female theme is carrying forward in both cases. So now he meets two men in prison. The 2 men approach him for help. They see him as different than all the other prison inmates, so they come to him and they want to stir up a conversation with him because they've seen some disturbing dreams that they figure maybe he can tell us what it means. He seems like a spiritual person. On the flip side, the 2 women don't approach Musa, he approaches them. He approaches them, right? So for help. He looks like, because they were playing some kind of tug of war Olympic sport with their goats and their sheep. Their sheep see water and they want to go drink it, but these girls are not letting them go drink the water, these 2 young women. And he's seeing them struggle, like the sheep are dragging them down the hill and they're pulling them back up and they're dragging them down the hill, tadudan. And he comes up to them and says, Ma khatbukuma, what's your deal? Like, what's going on with you? Right? So he wants to come and help them. So there's a contrast. The 2 approach Yusuf, and in Musa he approaches the 2. So it's flipped. Now, he helps them with interpretation, which is his special gift. وَيُعَلِّمُكَ مِن تَأْوِيلِ الْحَدِيثِ. Yusuf alayhi salam's special ability is to hear someone talk and figure out what's going on, including dreams. Right? And so that's how he helps them. When Musa alayhi salam offers his help, what do they need from him? They need his strength. He grabs the sheep, he goes down to the water, moves the other men like flies buzzing, feeds the animals, brings them right back, and that's done deal. Because, his strength has already been described. So both the gift that Allah gave them is what they put to use. Also, we learn from it that sometimes people will come to you asking for help. And if Allah has gifted you with the ability to help them, then you should. Like, if somebody asked me to interpret a dream for them, and I don't have that skill, and I don't have that skill, I shouldn't be helping them. And if I'm not strong enough to herd the sheep, and the girls were stronger than I was, and if I go take the sheep are going to run me, not me running the sheep, and I shouldn't go offer my help. If somebody comes to you for help, if Allah has given you the ability to help them and in what they need, you should. And if you see someone in need of help and you actually have the ability to help, then go and help. But there are also manners and ethics in helping. It's different when you help women. When you help someone of the opposite gender, there are different manners involved. So in one case, Yusuf is helping people of the same gender, yes? But Musa is helping people of the opposite gender, right? And they're both in case, by the way, it's interesting, from context we know they're young women. From context we know that, okay? Allah just says imra'atani, which means two women, but obviously they're of marriage age, which is what was said later on, so we know they're younger women. In the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, he says he met two fatayan, two young men. So even youth is mentioned on both sides. One explicitly, one implicitly. But you notice these manners that I was talking about, Yusuf alayhi salam doesn't just interpret their dream. He says, listen, lunch hasn't been served yet, but before lunch comes here, I'll have your answer for you. But sit, let me talk to you a little bit. And he starts talking about his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather and the religion of Islam. And do you really think many gods are better than one God? And he's giving them da'wah. He's preaching to them. Look, you guys came to me, you wanted my help. I'm going to use the opportunity to give you a good message and also give you what you need. Right? But he's roping them into a conversation. And he even says, I won't waste your time. Before lunch gets here, you'll have what you want from me. But give me a couple of minutes, right? But you contrast it with Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam has also been learning about Islam. And he learned about Islam from his wonderful mother and his stepmother. So he could go up to the girls and say, let me tell you something about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't do that. He just says, what's wrong with you? Ma khatbukuma. And they spoke and they said, La nasqi hatta yustira ri'a'u wa abuna shaykhun kabir. We're not going to give our animals anything to drink until the rest of the flock is done, and our dad is too old to do this kind of work. That's all they said. He doesn't say anything more. That's it. He's heard enough. He grabbed and he just took it. فَسَقَى لَهُمَا ثُمَّ تَوَلَّى إِلَى الظِّلِّ. He gave the animals drink and went back and sat down under the shade. He doesn't even say, no need to say thank you, there's no price for awesomeness. He doesn't do that. Why? Because if you want to help someone of the opposite gender, genuinely, then you're not interested in conversation, because conversation can go down the wrong path, even if it's meant with good intent. So offer the help and be done with it. That's it. But when it comes to the same gender, then you should take the opportunity to give some da'wah. Right? If you're a university student, and you're a guy, are you the only human being left on earth to give this girl da'wah at the cafeteria for 3 hours? No. It's okay. If she needed help, then if she had a flat tire, they'll go fix the tire and go run for it. Get out of here. Don't stick around, because you're opening doors to fitna. And so that's actually one of the ethics we learn about helping and keeping things strictly business when it comes to the opposite gender. Now, Yusuf alayhi salam, when he helped these two young men, he also kind of had an expectation. He told them, look, when you get out, because the dream interpreted that one of them will get out, right? He said, when you get out, could you mention me? Just at least mention me. Because I'm being detained here without a trial, so I don't even have a court date. Can you just at least mention me? So that maybe they'll put my court date on the docket. Right? Just do that much for me. Can you do that? Of course, you helped us, we'll do that. I'll do that for you. So he expects to be mentioned. When Musa alayhi salam helped these two women, did he expect anything in return? No. So there's a contrast now. One has an expectation, the other has no expectation. Let's see how that plays out. When Yusuf expects to be mentioned, the guy leaves jail, never mentions him. Musa alayhi salam did not expect to get mentioned. The girls go home, and what do? They mention him. Sometimes Allah will open doors for you through people when you never expected anything from them. And sometimes you will expect things from people and they will never give it to you, and you'll be thoroughly disappointed. Right? And Allah is telling us these two different kinds of people. And there's another part of this. Sometimes you expect something and you spell it out, I expect something, and it doesn't happen. Other times you never asked. When you never asked and somebody helps anyway. Look, he's homeless. He looks like his clothes are in tatters. He has nowhere else to go. His residence at the moment is sitting in the shade of a tree. These girls obviously know he needs help. So when they come with help, he's not going to turn to them and say, excuse me, I didn't ask for your help. I didn't ask. I'm not begging. I have too much self-respect. I helped you because it was for the sake of Allah. He's not going to do that. When someone is offering you help, that doesn't humiliate you. That doesn't make you a beggar. When someone's offering you help and then they try to remind you that they helped you or humiliate you that they helped you, that's something else. But when someone's genuinely asking your help, your first reaction should not be, oh, this is a hit on my self-esteem. I do things by myself. I don't need anybody else. No, you didn't beg anybody, but somebody saw that you might need some help and they came and offered help. And he did. They came and offered help and he didn't say, well, no, I did that for the sake of Allah. I don't want your money. He said, no, let's go get paid. He was ready to go. On the flip side, Yusuf a.s. actually has an expectation and it wasn't met. So we're going to meet all kinds of people. And Allah's help will come from all different kinds of ways. And sometimes we're hoping it comes from where we expect and it won't come from there. And sometimes we have no expectation, it'll come from there. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. Now one of the two men returns years later in the story of Yusuf a.s. Years later, Imam Razi says maybe 7 years later. There's no clear number. We know that bid'a sineen is mentioned. Bid'a sineen means less than 10 years. Okay, so it could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be 9 years, whatever. It's interesting also the years of isolation in the case of Musa alayhi salam is 8 to 10 years. Right, so the numbers are somewhat similar, not exactly, but somewhat similar. But anyway, so one of the two men returns years later. And one of the two women returns years later. Actually, hours later. Not years later, hours later. So sometimes help comes immediately, sometimes help comes a lot of time later. And this idea of immediate help and later relief is also a continuous theme. In Yusuf's case, Yaqub alayhi salam lost Yusuf and got him back years later. In Musa's case, Musa's mom lost Musa and got him back hours later. Later on in the story, Yusuf alayhi salam had expectation for someone to come back and they came back years later. And in Musa alayhi salam's, without even expectation, the girl comes back with help hours later, right? So that's an interesting bit for the two. Now, when he does come back, the man does come back after a few years, it's interesting, he came back for selfish reasons. It's a pretty interesting character, this guy. He's kind of a sleazebag. He works in the court of the king, he serves drinks for him, the king sees a dream, he can't figure out what it means, his advisors say, you probably ate too much biryani last night or something, it's ajdathu ahlam, these are meaningless dreams, this is too much spice in your food, that's why you saw these weird dreams, they don't mean anything, fat cows, skinny cows, what is this? And this guy pouring the drink for a king, he goes, oh, I know somebody the guy who figured out my dream. I know the guy who could do this. But he doesn't say that, does he? He says, Ana atikum bihi. I could tell you what it means. Give me a couple of days. Give me a little bit of time. I'll tell you what it means. Because if he comes back with the interpretation, he knows he's going to get rewarded. He's going to get a promotion. He doesn't say, I know someone I met in prison. On top of all of that, didn't Yusuf tell him, can you just mention me? Can you at least just mention me? He won't do that. He won't do that because if he even mentions him now, not only will Yusuf get out of jail, he'll get the credit for interpreting the dream, which he wants for himself. So he comes to him, and when he comes to him in jail, he says, Yusuf, ayyuha siddiq. The Quran says, Yusuf, oh my God, my most true friend. Oh you're like my real friend, man. You're like the most true friend I ever had. What we got is real. That's Siddiq. Siddiq comes from Siddiq, which is true. Right? So Siddiq is a friend. Siddiq is a completely true, sincere friend. And Yusuf a.s. sees through it. He goes, I ain't telling you nothing until you get me out of jail. This is not happening. This is not happening. He's not playing that game. But he did come back for selfish reasons. And clearly, the one who wants, and that's why Yusuf was summoned, because he does have the answer, right? But who needs the answer? The king does. The king is in need of the answer, and Yusuf has the answer. So the one in need is the one calling him. This is the idea that I want to present to you. On the flip side, when she returns, when she comes back, she doesn't come back for herself. She came back for the benefit of Musa alayhi salam, selfless reasons, not selfish reasons. Now, he shamelessly asks for help, right? He should be ashamed of himself. He didn't even mention his name. And on the flip side, tamshi ala istihya. When she came walking to him to tell him, my dad wants to pay you, Allah says she walked shyly over. So there's shamelessness and there's shame contrasted with the two individuals. So he asks to be taken out of prison. Yusuf alayhi salam asks, I want to get my case heard. And on the flip side, he was asked to come and get paid. You were asked to go. And this is about the need. Now, another interesting contrast is when Yusuf alayhi salam got a chance to speak to these two men, he told them how blessed he is. What a blessed family he belongs to. Meaning the blessings he has enjoyed in life. Now, it's interesting that he's talking about the blessings he's enjoyed in life while he's sitting in jail. Musa alayhi salam got a chance to tell his story a little bit when he finally came to get paid. And he's talking to the old fellow, the father of those two girls. Allah says, فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُ وَقَصَّ عَلَيْهِ الْقَصَصِ قَالَ لَا تَخَفْ نَجَوْتَ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. When he came to him, he told him the entire account about how he was supposed to be killed when he was a baby, and how he survived, and how they're out to kill him now, and how he's a fugitive from the law, and he's wanted for murder. Problems, problems, problems. So when he told his story, he didn't talk about how my brothers did this to me, Yusuf alayhi salam. He didn't talk about what my brothers did to me, and what happened to me, and that I've been falsely accused. He didn't say any of that. He said how blessed I am to be part of that family. But with Musa alayhi salam, he talked about the trauma that he experienced. Right? And how he's escaped. What does that tell you? That doesn't tell you, and we exonerate, or we exalt, we hold in high honor both of these prophets. What that means is it's completely okay in some cases for you to tell someone the difficult things you went through. Because they're weighing heavy on your heart, like who did? Musa alayhi salam. Allah is not condemning him for telling that story. It was weighing heavy on his heart. And on the flip side, Yusuf alayhi salam, and sometimes you can find yourself long-term in a difficult situation, and if you find yourself long-term in a difficult situation, then you need to now internalize that and focus on the blessings Allah has given you despite all the negatives around you. Right? And so Yusuf alayhi salam is going to focus on the blessings that he enjoys. Then, I've already told you this one, the king is in need of help and calls for him, but he is in need of help and gets called by the sheikh, meaning Musa himself is in need of help. A couple more left. It's just a numbers thing. They met two people in the beginning, I told you, in isolation, and they met two people. But the story only continues with one of them, in Yusuf's case, right? And then he meets two women, but the story only continues with one of them in Musa alayhi salam's case also. So with that, inshallah, I conclude the journey, or the isolation portion of the parallels between the two. We've only got now the concluding pieces left, so I think we can be done with the comparisons tomorrow. I'm pretty confident, and we can get into the surah eventually. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikril hakim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. You see what I did there?